A woman commutes 20 miles to work every day. A policeman follows and learns of a horrifying secret. She had been walking to and from work every day for the previous 6 months. Though she hoped for a better option, she was aware that this was the wisest course of action. Her 10-mile commute to and from work had been difficult at first, but after more than 6 months, it had gotten much better. She had quickly become used to it. All that changed, though, one day when she realized a police officer was trailing after her. Marie Ann was your average 40-year-old American living in Detroit, Michigan, a mom of 2 beautiful young boys. Marie had raised them by herself, doing everything she could to give them the best lives they could ask for. She was working as a waitress, comfortable with everything she had, but all this changed in the bat of an eye. In the first quarter of 2021, Marie's company laid off several employees, including her. The news came as a surprise. She dipped into her savings to support her 2 boys. Realizing she needed a new job urgently to avoid homelessness, Marie faced numerous challenges during her job search. Despite encountering difficulties and being passed over by many potential employers, Marie persevered, scouring job websites for months until she found a promising position. However, there were significant drawbacks. Though the job was similar to her previous one, it paid less, and the company offices were located 10 miles away from her home. With no spare money for commuting and deep in debt after a year of unemployment, Marie reluctantly settled for the job. On the day of the interview, Marie successfully secured the position. However, as she commuted back that afternoon, she realized she could save money by walking to and from work to address her bills and debts. One gloomy Tuesday morning, as Marie followed her usual route to work, she noticed a car trailing her. Initially dismissing it, she became uneasy when she realized a sergeant from the sheriff's office was driving the police cruiser. Caught in a sudden downpour with wet and aching feet, she pushed on through the rain, determined to avoid any complications with the trailing police car. Frustration surged as she wished the cop would leave her alone, given she had done nothing wrong. "Come over here!" he barked. There was nowhere to run. She couldn't ignore him any longer. Marie never trusted cops. She immediately feared the worst, and her head started to spin. Was she really in trouble just for walking to work? She heard the words entering her brain, but she couldn't quite grasp what Sergeant Bush was saying. Then the words slowly assembled themselves into meaning, and her eyes widened with disbelief. Sergeant Bush asked her to get into the vehicle, and she did. Her fate now rested entirely in his hands. Marie sat in silence in the officer's car, wondering where he was taking her. Was he taking her in for questioning? She glanced at him shiftily, but he continued to drive through the rain, his eyes on the road ahead. Marie had not been at all comfortable with the situation. This man had just ordered her into his car after all. She had stupidly complied. She should have run, she thought. That way she could have avoided this trouble and gone to work like she was trying to do to begin with. But it was too late now. For Marie, being in a cop car usually meant one thing: trouble. As a grown woman, Marie had faced numerous encounters with the law, often under unfavorable circumstances. From mistaken identity arrests to profiling incidents, her life seemed marked by brushes with law enforcement. Despite her innocence, she had spent a significant portion of her life in cuffs due to circumstances beyond her control. Seated in the police cruiser, Marie's mind raced as she pondered why the officer had picked her up, fearing she might not see her little boys again. Marie's upbringing in a crime-ridden neighborhood with her mom juggling the care of 12 kids, including siblings and cousins, exposed her to the harsh realities of life. Witnessing law enforcement enter her home and confrontations with the police became a recurring theme in her youth. Her determination to break free from this cycle led her to focus on academics. Marie aimed to create a better life for herself and her family. Marie worked hard throughout high school, juggling multiple jobs to support her family. She stayed away from trouble as much as possible, knowing that any misstep could send her spiraling back into the system. She managed to secure a scholarship for college, and that became her ticket out of the challenging environment she grew up in. College was a different world for Marie. She immersed herself in her studies and extracurricular activities, determined to break the cycle of hardship that had plagued her family. However, the echoes of her past were never too far behind. She often found herself looking over her shoulder, haunted by the fear that the law might catch up with her, even when she was doing nothing wrong. Seated in the back of Sergeant Bush's cruiser, Marie couldn't shake the familiar sense of dread encroaching upon her. As rain poured outside, she pondered if this was another instance of being at the wrong place at the wrong time, or if there was a more sinister motive at play. With the officer beside her remaining silent, focusing on the road ahead, Marie grappled with unanswered questions. She questioned the authenticity of the officer and wished she knew the destination that might soon become breaking news. In a surprising twist, she found herself worrying about work amid the stressful situation, realizing the immense pressure she had on her shoulders. As her mind raced with various possibilities, the car slowed down, snapping Marie out of her thoughts. Through the downpour, she saw the sign, and her heart skipped a beat. The officer had brought her to her workplace. However, this marked only the beginning of their unexpected encounter. Sergeant Bush, during his commute to the sheriff's office, had observed Marie on multiple occasions, recognizing her daily 10-mile journey on foot to work. Aware of the hazardous conditions, especially during heavy rain, he felt compelled to act. Accidents were common on that road, and on that particular rainy day, the threat of danger prompted him to stop and offer assistance. Was the officer merely extending a kind gesture, or did it signify something more profound? Drawing from his own experiences of walking to work in inclement weather before joining the force, Sergeant Bush empathized with Marie's predicament. Driven by a deep sense of responsibility, he went out of his way to ensure her safe arrival at work, feeling a duty to protect hard-working individuals from the elements. When they arrived, the officer said, "Here we are, miss. Rain's nothing to scoff at." But he didn't unlock the door. Marie's brows drew close, and she realized the officer wasn't joking. When a look of worry spread over his face, she was still mulling over his words when he revealed why he stopped her. Marie couldn't believe what she was hearing. It just seemed too good to be true, especially after all the bad thoughts she had during the trip. It wasn't like she had a good experience with police officers in the past. However, this man was about to change everything. After years of seeing police officers as the bad guys, Marie's mind had assumed the worst when the officer called her over. How could she see the worst in this man? And it was clear that such a thing didn't exist. Marie knew that her past had shaped her a lot, but she had no idea why she had such an antipathy toward police officers. It was something that had followed her for her entire life. But now she knew just how wrong she truly was. And this was just the beginning. Marie never felt so guilty in her life. She wished she'd known about this sooner. Maybe then she would have been friendlier. But as she stood there with rain drenching her hair, she didn't know how to react. Saying thank you just didn't seem like it would be enough. But what was it that the officer said to leave Marie feeling the way that she did? Why on earth was she feeling so guilty? And why didn't thank you seem like enough? Did the officer do more than just offer her a ride that day? And if he did, what was it? "I've been seeing you walk this route for more than 3 months now," the officer said. "Do you live close by?" Marie shook her head, saying, "I live about 7 miles down the road." "And you walk that distance every day?" the officer asked. "I do. Seems long, but you get used to it," Marie said with a smile. "Well, that changes today," the officer said. Marie had no idea what he had in mind. She took the officer's offer. He said he'd be delighted to drop her off at work every day. She was apprehensive about the situation, but then she realized he truly wanted to help. He was humble and attentive, listening to Marie's misfortunes and why she was walking to work every day. Unbeknownst to her, Sergeant Bush was orchestrating something significant behind her back. Despite her initial apprehensions, Marie continued to accept rides from him whenever the weather took a turn for the worse. Impressed by Marie's resilience, Sergeant Bush was determined to go beyond offering rides. Taking swift action, he reached out to the local Walmart to explore potential support. What he did next would have a lasting impact on her life. Anticipating a meeting with Sergeant Bush, Marie waited at her usual spot with a mix of eagerness and nervousness. Old feelings of distrust for law enforcement resurfaced, and she braced herself for a potential reprimand, despite being unaware of any wrongdoing. As the police officer pulled up in his cruiser, Marie approached, uncertain about the unfolding events. To her surprise, he presented her with a significant gift, a brand new Schwinn Fairhaven women's cruiser bicycle. It wasn't long before word of the officer's kind deed spread across the town. Local reporters clamored to interview Sergeant Bush. I wanted to help Marie because she walks 5 miles to work every day, regardless of the temperature, rain or shine, stands on her feet during her entire shift, and walks 5 miles under the same conditions back to her home. And that's truly admirable, Sergeant Bush told the local media. I've had the opportunity to get to know Marie and wanted somehow to lessen her burden of that 10-mile walk, he added in his interview. I was shocked, Marie said of the kind officer's incredible gift. For the first time in months, after a string of unfortunate luck, things seemed to finally be looking up for her and her family, thanks to the kindness of one cop who was determined to help the people in his community. After distrusting the police for her whole life, Officer Bush changed her perception of the intimidating men in uniform. Now she knew that the policemen in her community truly cared about her well-being.